In this video, I'm going to talk about how something that's so pervasive in our society and something that our brain actually does biologically all the time is crushing our freedom and happiness and success. Most people have no idea how much they're actually controlled by their unconscious label. See, the thing is, if you really want control in your life, you have to understand how labels are controlling you and how to use them in alignment with whatever it is that you want to create in the world. Because if you don't take full control of your brain's ability to label and use it with intention, then you'll just fall prey to all of the programming and the negative effects of labeling. And I want to talk about labels from a personal standpoint and how they empower us or how they disempower us. And for the most part, the way labels are used, they're disempowering. They don't have to be disempowering. Labels are neither good nor bad, but the way most of us use them, it becomes disempowering. So I want to break that down, explain why they're disempowering, and obviously help you move to a place of more intention and more power. But first of all, I wrote down a few labels, and I want you to just listen to these labels and pay attention to how you receive these labels. Because my mouth is just about to make a sound. That's all it's going to do. But that sound is going to hit you, and there will be an image that is produced, maybe several. There might be an emotion that's produced in you. There might be movement that's produced. You might literally feel yourself move back or scrunch your face or smile. Not every single one of these is going to affect you, but if you're like most people, several of these will give you a reaction. And all they are is sounds. So I want to read these to you, and I want you to just pay attention and then share for sure if there are certain ones that really react to you. Some of these are, they're hot topics, right? Potentially combustible topics. So I don't want to get into any of that stuff about what it means to be a this or what it means to be a this or the rightness or wrongness of any of that. I just want you to pay attention to these labels' effect on you. Here you go. Narcissism, depression, racism, sexism, ageism, gay, straight, homophobia, feminism, masculinity, patriarchy, conservative, oppression, Christian, liberal, Muslim, Jewish, Buddhist, Democrat, Republican, communist, socialist, democracy, shy, introvert, extrovert, achiever, loser, dummy, stupid, pretty, ugly, perfect, polished, good, bad. And there are plenty more. So I just want you to pay attention to how these labels affect you. If these labels are significant in your life because you were called some of these things, or you call other people some of these things, or they just have a certain kind of connotation for you, then essentially these labels own you. Because all I did was make a sound. And if I can make a sound over the internet and it affects your body, then that sound owns you. That sound controls you because it just caused you to react. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. I've got plenty of sounds that control me. I think we all have sounds that control us. But I want to dive into how and why they control us and what we can do about it if we don't like the ones that do control us, or we don't like the way that certain ones control us and we want to change the control that they have over us. But this is a function of being human, and it's a function of the way the brain works. We've heard these labels over and over and over and over again, and they're attached to certain memories that we have. And they're attached to a certain number of times that we hear it. The repetition of labels creates more attachment to the labels. And we've got energy attached to them. We've got thoughts. We've got emotions. So when we hear a sound, all of these things get triggered inside of us. And the bad effect of that is that the way they cause us to respond internally could then create a response externally for us. So we might hear a label, we get all triggered, and then we snap on our kids or our spouses or just somebody that we care about. And it's because the label put us into a different state, which then caused a reaction that is not the kind of reaction that we want. So essentially the label controlled us enough to alter our behavior. And this is what's happening really all the time, all over the place. So if we want to be in control of our actions, then we need to be as much as possible in control of the labels that we subscribe to, and the labels that we control, and the labels that control us. And you can't control anything you don't understand. That's one of the reasons why I like to dive in and say, what is it, like how is this process actually working, and how was it created? Because if I understand the line of dominoes, right? If you imagine a line of dominoes, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, however many number of dominoes you have. If you understand the line of dominoes in your life, we call these strategies in coaching, and you don't want this line of dominoes to control you anymore, then you got to figure out which domino or dominoes can you pull out so that the domino on one end can still get pushed over, but it won't go all the way down the line. So many of our issues as people involve exactly that. Why does this label have such a control over me? Oh, here's why. Here's the line. Let me remove these 3 dominoes. And then the cool thing about that is you don't really have to do a lot about the label because you've detached its effect on you. The same thing goes for emotional conflicts and limiting beliefs that we have. Most of us have created a negative relationship with the concept of different. Think about it. If any of you experienced any kind of negative attention as a child, especially, if you were bullied, if you were made fun of, it wasn't because you were the same. It was because you were different, right? Nobody ever said, hey, look at you, you're just like me, let me bully you. Look at you, you're just like me, let me embarrass you. We get called out and then ridiculed because we are different. And then we don't want to be different. We want to be the same. Now, do we really want to be the same? No, we want to be accepted. But we've been taught that being different is not the way to be accepted. Being the same as the people who are doing the judging is the way to be accepted, because then we're not threatening to them. So we learn at an early age that it's safer to be similar and it's dangerous to be different. I never put those together. Somebody typed that in so I could remember it. It's safe to be similar, it's dangerous to be different. And then they get flipped. So now anything that's similar to me is safe for me, anything that's different than me is dangerous to me. So once upon a time, we didn't have a problem with difference, and then we felt different, so now it was a personal experience, and then we projected it externally. So if I'm dangerous to somebody else, if I'm different, then other people are dangerous to me when they're different. And a week or two ago on one of these live videos, I talked about differencism. And that's essentially at the core of it. Anything that's different than us feels dangerous, therefore we immediately resist. So the label of different is so disempowering and certainly dangerous to our goals and dreams, because we have to be different. In today's world, if you're not different, you can't stand out. If you can't stand out, you can't lead. You have to be different. You have to be distinct. You have to be unique. And our soul craves uniqueness, but our head fears difference. That's one of the perpetual conflicts that we have between the head and the heart. So we need to embrace our uniqueness. And for those of you that want to share your message in any way, if you want to be a coach or a speaker or a trainer, if you want to write books, your value is in your uniqueness. Nobody's going to pay you for your version of the same thing. They have to find something unique. They have to find something different. So your societal value is found in the very same uniqueness that your head is probably afraid of showing. And the brain operates on all of these dangers constantly, and it uses labels to conserve energy. Our brain is a labeling mechanism, and labels are judgments. So our brain is a judging mechanism. It's what it does. It has to. It has to be able to look at the world with all the billions of things that it could pay attention to in any given moment and label all of them with this almost unfathomable speed. Not almost, it is unfathomable to our brain, to our conscious mind at least, how quickly our unconscious mind is labeling everything everywhere for safety and conservation of energy. Because then we don't have to take a look at that thing. Like I'm looking at a thing right now at the window, and it's got this barrel kind of shape, and then it's got other sort of cylinders coming off of it, and then it's got these odd sort of shapes, and they're all over the place. But thankfully, at some point in time, I learned that that's a tree. And I don't need to go up and actually sniff that particular tree and touch its bark and explore and examine all the details of that particular thing, because my brain has labeled that thing as a tree. And I probably see 50 trees out my window. I don't need to go explore any of them. So labels cause us to understand without the need for exploring. Otherwise, we couldn't get very far in life if we had to explore every new thing that we had. But listen to what I just said. It gives us, and I'm going to use a different word, or I'm going to put a different word in here. It gives us the illusion of understanding without the need for exploring. Now, sometimes the understanding doesn't need exploring. I don't need to go make sure that all these things are trees in my life. I'm good with understanding, that thing over there is probably a tree. And if it's not a tree, it's not going to really affect my life all that much. So for the most part, our illusions of understanding the things that we haven't explored based on the labels that we've pre-decided that thing fits, for the most part, it doesn't affect our lives. But when we do have labels like racism, like shy, introvert, extrovert, all of those things that I read and so many more, if we don't explore the things that actually have control over our lives, then the best thing we can have is illusion. The best thing we can have is this false sense of control, right? And it leads to a bunch of stereotypes. But see, to the brain, I'm going to talk about racism for a second. If I'm racist and I don't like purple people, it's so much easier for me to notice purple and put all of my judgments on that person than it is to explore that individual outside of the label that I've already lived my life with. So again, it's ease. The brain would rather just project according to the labels than explore. It takes so much time to explore. And when you explore, you run the risk of finding evidence that your previous stories actually might not be true. And our unconscious mind hates the idea that all the stories we've lived our lives with and that we've built our lives upon might not be true. It hates that idea. So our unconscious mind is actually driven to prove the previous stories true, more so than to liberate our life. And again, that's this conflict that so many of us are struggling with. We're actually struggling with the previous stories of our life, but that's not how we expand. You cannot expand your life inside the restraints of your previous stories. If you want to expand your life, you have to move beyond the capacity of all the stories that you've been telling yourself from the past. And that requires us to, at the very least, loosen up the control that labels have on us. We need to have a bigger awareness that says people can't be put into a single box, especially new people, new opportunities, new things that I'm being exposed to, according to all the old things that I've always been exposed to. And when we live life according to the labels of our past, life actually keeps getting restricted more and more and more and more. It's like the arteries keep getting more and more clogged the more that we just live inside the labels from our past. So if we want our life to expand, then we have to remove the restriction of the labels. Our labels are ways for us to cope with life, and at a deep, deep level, they are ways for us to seek love. At some point in time, there was a label that gave us the experience of not love. And so we use, with the best of our ability and capacity, we use these labels to try to get back to love. But the problem is, the labels are created by the conscious intellectual mind that doesn't even understand love. That's not where love is created, nor is it where love is actually felt. So we're using the intellectual mind to try to computerize our human experience of love. It doesn't work that way. And so the more that we succumb to the influence of all these labels, the less we have the capacity to love, the less we have the capacity to receive love. Love is not in the labels of our human experience. Love is in the human experience underneath the labels. And once upon a time, we didn't have the labels. Labels are language. When we were 1 year old, we didn't know what racism was. We didn't know what shy was. We didn't know what introvert or dumb or any of these things were, because we didn't have the language to label the human experience, but we had the human experience. When we were 1, we knew what it felt like to feel love and to feel not love. And we knew joy and we knew sadness. We knew all of our foundational human experiences. They were underneath the labels because we didn't have the labels yet. We didn't have the language. So if we want to experience our life and experience our love, we have to go underneath the labels. It's like the labels are the cement that has been hardened above our human experience. And most of us are experiencing our life from the other side of the labels. So we can't really penetrate down into these human experiences while we're just looking at the cemented foundation of the labels. And we got 8 billion or so people on this planet, and they don't fit all of our previous labels. So what are we robbing ourselves from experiencing when we are committed to our intellectual labels to make life easier? And I wouldn't say it makes life easier as much as it makes life simpler, but simple from a computer standpoint. It's so much easier to look at all the people called white and put them in this bucket, all the people called black and put them in that bucket, all the people called Asian and put them in that bucket, all the people called old, all the people called gay, all the people called young, all the things and experiences that have these labels, it's so much simpler to go, oh, I don't need to explore that individual human because he's black. I don't need to explore that individual human because he's a Republican. I don't need to explore that individual experience because it happens on another continent. It's so much easier for the mind to go, I don't need to explore this because I already have a label that has prejudged it. And there is no joy in prejudice. There is no love in prejudice unless your judgment is love. But the labels that our intellect comes up with so that we don't have to explore life cannot give us the experiences of life. I would say the experience of humanity can only be found in the exploration of humanity. And that has to happen underneath the labels. So the only way to be liberated for a life of deeper, richer experiences is to understand the labels that have a hold on you and then explore them. And one of the things that most of us just don't want to do is explore us. But if you're not willing to explore self, then you can't liberate self. All you can do is keep packing it down with more labels, the labels of simplicity. And life might seem simple to the intellectual mind, but it's not going to feel rich in your heart. So I want to leave you with that. I'd love to know what landed in general, and more specifically, if you identify certain labels that have had control over you and you're willing to explore them. What do you find in the exploration of those labels? And exploring humanity is not a 1, 2, 3 process. It's not an intellectual, just follow these exact steps process. It's a child getting in the dirt and the sand and just playing and doing things. There's no right way to do it. But that's where our pure joy lives. There's also not a one-size-fits-all formula for joy. So the things that most of us are wanting to experience in our lives are way outside the box of our intellectual formulas. And actually, everything I've been talking about from a labels perspective is a formula. If this thing fits that label, then it goes in that bucket. If this thing fits that label, then it is all of my predetermined judgments. Now, if you like this video, check out that one where I'll teach you what the real source of happiness is. And I guarantee you, it's not what you think. If we don't change the way that we talk about difference in our society, then we cannot connect in our society. So it's not about what my